It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. I've got some friends coming over to say hello. Hi, babies. Hello, girl. Don't worry about her little mask. This is just because she has eye infection sometimes, and the flies will get in her face. And this guy, hello, baby. Hi. Is equally wonderful. Hi. Mwah. Nice, right? So I figured I'd introduce you to two of my favorite people. There you go. And there you go. And let's go take a look at the shop. I'd like for people to come check out what's here in Maryland. This is my garden that I have rebuilt and planted and created some very good soil with which to grow. So there's the pad with the barn, which is rigging loft and potentially, hang out in teaching area. And for those that are interested in this worm composting thing, so I've got the worms are up here and the coconut fiber with, I put stuff in a blender. And then down here, I can release some really good, nutritious stuff for the soil. Living things. But I thought it would be kind of fun to make a little video to show what's here in my home. So I'm gonna take off my farm boots. I'll stick you guys on a tripod and do some sewing. Let's build some parachutes, right? It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. A beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? So I've done the center cell already. So I'm going to take the number 4 and bring this over to the sewing machine and get this party started a little bit. So this machine is something that has been building parachutes for probably nearly 40 years. How about that, right? It's pretty amazing. Of course, I need my glasses. There they are. Always keep your glasses and your snips nearby. And this is a twin needle, right? So it's got 2 separate needles on my Juki. And sometimes I do single needle operations on it as well, because she's my favorite. This is Judy. We've got Frida over there, and in the back we've got the bar tacker I call Speedy Gonzalez. And I'm just going to line up this needle and tighten it down. There we go. And pop in the other bobbin. One of the more important things to good sewing is wind bobbins as you go and double check that both bobbins are ready before you start. So everything looks pretty good. I'm going to thread the needle as well now. And, I've been building canopies for over 30 years. And I must say that my eyes are not as good as they once were. So the glasses are actually part of the equipment. Only at a 2.0 magnifier at this point. That's not too bad. I'm turning 57 years old shortly. All right. That's a good sound. Among my favorites. So before you get started, I think it's really important to just take a moment, make sure everything is tightened down I lubricate the machines regularly. Here's another little hot tip. Beeswax. Keep your needles in beeswax and they slip in and out easier. All right, so check yourself, make sure your chair is set up exactly the way you want it to be. And first things first, let's orient the skins. All right. Big things sometimes take a while to line up. But before I start a seam like this, I make sure that the previous seam looks good and I don't have any funky sewing. Now this machine is a puller wheel. So what that means is it actually helps advance the fabric, which is pretty thin stuff. If you don't have a puller wheel, what tends to happen is it crimps up the fabric, like a lot. And you end up with all kinds of shrinkage, and that results in distortion of your intended shape. So I'm just going to slide this in here, make sure it's right in every way. Take a breath. It's just like skydiving, right? So this seam is maybe a little bit hard to see precisely what I'm doing here. Let's tilt the camera down a little bit so you can see better. And I'm going to have to do a little fold here where the reinforcing tape begins. This is a non-loaded top surface seam. Forward, back, and then forward again to anchor it down. That will get a bar tack, but not yet. So around the curve is the tricky part. What I'd suggest is if you're sewing around a curve, just do 2 stitches at a time, maybe 3 at the most, so that you can reorient the fabric. It is a little tricky to do this sort of a seam on the thin ZP, and it can be a little hard on the hands. I spent a lot of time icing my hands and taking Epsom salts baths after sewing because I get sore. All right, so I've got the seam begun. Tilt this camera up a little bit. But it's just like skydiving, right? Before you do something important, take a breath. And stay as relaxed as you can. And don't forget, your body is not only your hands, it's the whole thing, right? So if you're holding tension in your shoulders, you can't sew as accurately. So you try to stay as present as possible. This is a prototype 150 Samurai 2. Been working on the Sam 2 for many years, and this one will be a pretty big step forward. I've been wanting to try some of these changes for quite a while. I've tested in miniature. I've done all sorts of little experiments leading to the big one that involves me throwing a pilot chute. And of course I'll test it in the wind first, just kiting it. But at the end of the day, you just gotta pull and see what happens and try it out, right? So when I'm flying a new canopy, obviously I try to get open nice and high, and I will address each of the issues in triage, right? So first of all, does the thing fly straight? What about varying angle of attack? How does that feel when I get lift, when I add brakes all the way into it? And do I feel that lift increase as indicated by my weight gain? And at what point in the toggle stroke does my weight increase? Then I'm going to surge and see if I can drop the nose. What does that feel like? Does the canopy remain stable or not? And then I'm going to get a little more aggressive and turning progressively toggle turns, harness turns, front and rear riser turns. And particularly on the front, I'm going to really pay attention to stability, right? Because front risers, you're kind of dropping the nose pretty aggressively in a distortion of the angle of incidence. And you're changing the airfoil shape too. So that's one of the ways to find out if your canopy is safe and stable. And the other one is to oscillate it back and forth with alternate toggle input. Right, so if I sharply hit a toggle, the canopy goes into the turn, it kind of flies itself out of it usually, but if I oscillate, that's going to throw a wingtip at the relative wind and it might fold under. You learn a lot about a parachute when you do that, whether it's quick to recover or not. So I'm lining up my match marks. As I sew, I've got constant feedback because on the rib and on the skin, I'll have different marks that help me line it up. Nevertheless, cutting and marking don't always work out as planned. So I'm going to go all the way back to the tail and see if those marks were actually drawn correctly on the part, because it's one component that cuts and one component that draws, and they can be offset. So in this case, I'm going to load up the rib just a little bit as I sew, so the back of the rib meets the back of the skin, right? In this case, like the top skin. So you can actually work fabric a surprising amount. You know, if you're offset, you line up the rib and the skin, and if they don't line up right one way or the other, you can fix it if you've got a meter or two. If you try to fix it inside of an inch or two, or even a foot, it's too short a distance, it'll crimp the fabric and distort the parachute. You're better off unpicking back a good ways and then trying to fix it from there. So that you can make those changes to the loading of the fabric gently over time. Okay, so lining up pretty well here. This is just one rib, and sometimes, you know, when you're building cross brace canopies, it can be more than one rib. And let's get it to the end. And at the end, I'm gonna move things forward, snip off my threads, flip it over, and I'm gonna inspect this seam from the other side. My friend Joan that taught me sewing when I worked at Airtime, she was one of our best sewers. There's Jean and Joan, the feisty, sarcastic older ladies that really knew their business, you know. Like, Brian, you remember you've got two sides to your work, right? So double check both sides. There's lots of things that could be wrong, you know, so as far as how big the seam allowance is, right? The edge of the fabric from the outboard needle or the non-loaded stitch row. So I'm just going to double check everything is right. Looks good. Very nice. Would you like to see some more? Well, let's take a look at the rest of the shop. I'm going to put on my boots here. Nice big rubber boots when you live on a farm. It's kind of a good thing to have. And these boots I found at the Skydive the Ranch, or it's called the Blue Sky Ranch, in New York. There was an end of the year giveaway, all the stuff that was left at the end of the season in the lost and found box. I got a lot of drop zone stuff from that. So let's take a look. Hey, the dogwood is blossoming. How nice is that? So the barn is where I do all the rigging. And let's flip on the lights so you can see a little bit better. Line table is here, right? So I've got the spools of line, and you can see looking down the table. Nice long table so I can build big parachutes. Whoops. There you go. And the way this works, for those who haven't seen a professional line table, is that this is a drawer slide. And it moves, and the tape measure moves along with it. Underneath the table, there's a weight. And that weight is adding a consistent force on the fabric, right? On the weave pattern, you know, sort of extending the weave of the line. So I make a finger trap loop. I put that over the tape measure, and then I can pull from the line itself, put it down against the tape measure, and then I make my marks. And so I get a very consistent result, which is, I think, imperative. Line table is here. And of course I've got, you know, a hanging harness. This one is set up for a paragliding deal, which I think is a lot of fun. If you want to take a break, you know, work on your harness turns and just look outside at the forest. That's pretty neat. Hot knife setup. I like it up on the ceiling like this, so it's sort of away from everything, and I have a light bulb to remind me that it's on. So up these steps, we go to the loft. Always I'm vacuuming because, you know, when I do relines, there's little bits of line everywhere. Take off my boots, shoes off in the loft, please. And so I've got a place to hang up the canopies. I've got another one on this side. And someday, when I reinforce this header here, I should be able to set up another hanging harness up in the loft. So yeah, pretty darn cool. And this, if you're curious, this is the first airlock canopy I ever built. So the valves are pink, oops, you know, on the inside here, and then the bottom skin. Very conclusive evidence right off the bat when I built that thing. I was like, yep, I think I'm on to something. It flew like a rocket. So that's what I named this parachute. I called it the Rocket. Flew it like a kite, dropped it off of the fire escape at University of Vermont repeatedly, along with other prototypes that were, you know, I had another one that was just like it without airlocks, and I'd drop it in the wind. Turbulence in between the buildings really helped me to figure out what is the truth. Yes. So let's turn off lights because I have a lot more main seam sewing ahead of me. And I thought it would be very nice for you guys to see what's here and maybe motivate some of you to want to come and learn rigging, learn sewing, build your own miniature base canopy. I think you'll like that. Because the little base canopies actually work very well as a kite as well. And I've got the swing, goes way up in the tree. And I put the paraglider harness on here as well. A lot of fun. And we can work on PLF training and all sorts of, you know, you can work on your skills of doing blind man, dragging a foot. But yeah, I thought this would be kind of a fun deal to see what I'm building out of nothing, out of an abandoned house in Maryland, with a 100-something-year-old barn. I'm building a place where people can come and learn. I've got VR systems for teaching you better canopy flight, and the hiking trails and the river right there. So come and pay me a visit. Call to schedule.